Grant Robertson.
Speaker, as the local member in whose electorate the Carter Observatory stands, I'm very proud to stand here tonight and support this bill. It was a nice occasion when we had the reopening and the launch, and Dr Mapp spoke there. It was a moving speech, or people moved fairly quickly with the refreshments anyway immediately afterwards. No, it was a very, very good speech. I shouldn't be so ungracious to Dr Mapp. It was a very good speech. In fact, he shared with us some of his astronomical background and even some astrological background as well. So it was a very good speech. I really do want to first lay on the table the importance of the role of the Wellington City Council here. And the Wellington City Council have taken on the Carter Observatory and have committed themselves both in terms of the funding that they put in place to do the refurbishment, but also some long-term funding to support the observatory. And it's now got a key place in the Wellington City tourism attractions. And I know my colleague Heather Roy is a strong supporter of Zealandia, the Karori Sanctuary experience, and that's also obviously had a refurbishment in recent times with the development of the visitor experience there. We've also got the Atari Wilton Bush area down near where I live in the suburb of Wilton, Te Papa and other tourist attractions that are really allowing Wellington now to create a good tourist experience that's built around the natural advantages that we have. And most of the MPs in the House here will have travelled on the cable car up towards where the Carter Observatory is, and it's just a great way for people to experience Wellington as a city, to be able to get on that cable car, reach the top and take a short walk to the Carter Observatory and see it in all its glory now. So I think it's a real testament to the Wellington City Council. They've shown a great degree of patience, I might add as well, having had this bill before the House for some time, and have taken on their roles and responsibilities in the absence of actually having a legislative mandate for that. So I think we as a House need to congratulate the Wellington City Council for their work in that regard. And I do think it's important to note that the future of Carter Observatory is now as an education and tourism destination. It isn't the National Research Observatory any longer, and it's been discussed by other members in the House as to how that's come about. I do still think there is a place for us thinking about how we continue to fulfil research functions as they relate to astronomy and to the role of an observatory, but clearly that's not the future for Carter. The future for Carter is in tourism, and as we sat after Dr Mapp's moving speech in the planetarium at the Carter Observatory and stared at the stars and well, you know, you should have been there. It was a beautiful experience, and it was an occasion when you realised just how fantastic this would be for children to go there. And I think a lot of us realise, as Moana Meki said before, that astronomy is the gateway to science for an awful lot of people. And as I sat there in the planetarium, I was actually reflecting on what would be the future for a young person who came to the Carter Observatory and found themselves fascinated by science and wanted to get involved in research. And they looked perhaps to the government to see whether this was something that was important to the government. And perhaps what they might find, well, no, they really shouldn't do that, because to start with, one of the early actions that perhaps people at the Carter Observatory might have noticed from the government was the cutting of support for science advisors moving into schools. The very people who actually help gather together the resources and support the teachers who might be taking their students to the Carter Observatory, and that was cut out by this government. But of course that's only small beer in comparison to removing the R&D tax credit and taking away the Fast Forward Fund. And while we did see some funding in this recent budget around research and development and supporting science, it in effect really is nowhere near enough. It's half of what the National Party promised in 2008, and it's half of what would have been there had we stuck with Labor's Fast Forward Fund and R&D tax credits. But it's also important that as these people who are sitting in the observatory, Mr Speaker, are thinking about their career in science, it's not just government that will be supporting science, it is the private sector. And we haven't had a great record in New Zealand of private sector investment in research and development and private sector investment in science. But that's what the R&D tax credit was about. It was actually about encouraging private sector investment in science, giving some notion that the government understood the importance of this. And even if it's not accepted for its own value, there's the fact that Australia has it. And therefore, if Australia has it, we are automatically at a disadvantage. And we hear often from members on the other side that we need to catch up with Australia, we need to compare ourselves with Australia. Yet in an area where Australia is saying, yes, we think it's important, we're going to support private sector investment in research and development, the government walked away from that. So young people who visit the Carter Observatory and consider a career in science are getting all the wrong signals from this government, Mr Speaker. They're not seeing a government putting its own money into research and development. They're not seeing it supporting the private sector to put its money into research and development. And I think that's a very sad thing, because if we are going to increase our standard of living, if we are going to look at to be a sustainable country as we go on into the 21st century, we need to be investing in new technology. We need to be encouraging young people to follow science through and to see that science is in fact not only something that is interesting of itself, and that being in an astronomy like the and looking into astronomy rather, and being at the Carter Observatory and looking at the stars is only a gateway to that. If we can actually encourage people to see a career in science, if we can actually see that there is both money to be made and great satisfaction from the discoveries that one makes when you're interested in science, we need the government to be supporting that. So, Mr Speaker, I certainly do support this bill. The Carter Observatory is playing the tourism role, as I've mentioned, in Wellington City. It's also continuing to play its education role, and I want to pay a tribute here to the staff of the observatory, who not only have managed to work through a period of great change and a period in which they had to suffer through uncertainty about their future, they've actually managed to, through that, continuing to produce good quality resources for teachers and good quality resources for students to use. And as Moana Meki said, they have played a role as a private training establishment. They're accredited by NZQA. This is high quality science, high quality education, and a fantastic tourism experience for anyone who's visiting Wellington, and I encourage all MPs to make the most of their time in Wellington and visit attractions such as the Carter Observatory and Zealandia, and ensure that you get what Wellington has to offer. And should you find yourself in Whakatane, Ms Mackie, yes, also the Whakatane Observatory.
Very good. Louise Upston.
Mr Speaker, I'm pleased